My name is Ann Lebo. I'm an English teacher at Grundy Center High School. We have been a one-to-one school for 3 years. Currently, our students have MacBooks. We started with grades 9 through 12, and now we have grades 6 through 12 who all have devices that they take home with them. The most prominent difference that I've seen is that I actually have more time to interact with my students. We talk more now than we did before, simply because there's so many management pieces that are taken off the table when you equal the playing field or you even the playing field, and kids all have access to the same information all the time. A lot of the work that we used to do in class, you can do at home. So when they come to class, that pre-work can be done ahead of time so we can sit down and actually engage and discuss in the material, and we don't waste 20 minutes collecting and handing back papers and figuring out what needed to be done. So one, it's really changed the level of interaction during class, but also I have a lot more access to my students than I ever had before through email. They'll contact me anytime. I'll have my students set up their cell phone numbers so they can text my email from their phone, and I can reply from my school email to their phone. So it's not private, it's not personal, but it's immediate access. I can reach any student anytime, and they use that a lot to interact with me too. So there's a different level of connection that you wouldn't have had before, where students are calling you at home if they have questions, but they also know that, you know, those are more, there's a time and place for different kinds of contact, but the classroom setting has really been enriched simply through personal interaction, because we can take a lot of things off the table that we didn't need to do, that we don't need to do anymore. You know, I select the same technology in the same way I would any instructional tool. I find the tool that will best meet their needs and help them to learn whatever it is I want them to learn. So it's hard to say what you're going to use, but for some reason when we look at technology, we start thinking about it just as a piece of technology as opposed to an extension of best practice and an extension of learning and instruction. So depending on what their needs are, I might use the tool in a way that provides them opportunity to interact, or I may take the tool off the table. It just depends on what their needs are. The thing is it gives me unlimited options, which is nice. Whatever my needs are, I can find through that device because they all have the exact same access. So whatever it is I need to get to them, I can get to them, whether it's different for each student or it's consistent across the board. It's pretty much limitless. So it just really depends on what your purpose is. You know what, a lot of the information I get is just from other teachers or updates on Twitter, or other people are doing common things. We have a lot of programs in Canvas that we can use, and that's our kind of our content management system we use for instruction. So a lot of it's already just in there, but instruction-wise, you know, textbooks have them, other teachers have them. You look at things even if you're implementing the core, or if you just Google, you know, something you need a student to learn, it's going to give you a list of 20 resources easily, and you figure out what's the one that's going to work best for them. We've done probes, I can do grammar assessments, I can make a game that gives an assessment. Iowa assessments have end of course cumulative kind of assessments. You can have formative and summative. It just, go to the internet and you can find anything. I mean, obviously you want things that are best practice and research based and supported, but you can find those. We're provided with a lot of resources just from our tech instructors. You know, we have weekly tech training, not only on how to use the tools, but on different resources for instruction and assessment and things like that. So it really, I can't say that there's one place I go to. It just depends on what it is I'm looking for, what it is that I need. There's usually someone here who's doing something and has a great idea, and you can use those people as well. But find your network or get on the internet and see what you can find out. Or ask the kids. Ask your students. I always find it interesting that the first question, or not the first question, but one of the most consistent questions with people looking to go one-to-one is classroom management. And my response is always, it comes down to student engagement. It doesn't matter what the distraction is. There's always going to be something new. Whether it's cell phones, which some schools are still struggling with, or it was kids passing notes, there's always something, but it still comes down to having your students engaged to an extent that they are more interested in what you're doing than whatever the distraction is. Granted, laptops are a very powerful distraction. They can be because of the access and kids are so connected to it, but it's if you have the students engaged either through the laptop or just in whatever you're doing, they will use it for the right purposes. and it won't become a distraction, but it just takes a different, I think it's often our perception of it as a distraction. We would never be having this conversation about whether the book's a distraction or a pencil's a distraction or a note's a distraction. We would just manage it. We would have proximity, we would have engagement, we would address it. So I think there's just this idea that whether it's a sense of fear or that I can't see what they're doing, but stop focusing on the distraction and focus back on the student. You're there for the students to help them learn. And if you do that, it's not going to be a distraction. It takes it out of the equation. So I think it's more of a shift in the mentality of the instructors than the students. And once you can get that point, it's just not a non-issue anymore. One other advantage of providing laptops to the students is that you own the laptops. It's school property. They take them home. They keep them, from fall to spring. And they very much personalize them, and we allow that. But it is still school property. And when you use that as leverage, you can take it from them. And that is the one thing, probably more than anything, that will impact their behavior. So if you use that as leverage in terms of if you're not being compliant or if you're being a problem in any sort of way, and you either restrict their access or you take it away, you're going to see a much quicker turnaround in their behavior than you would if you tried to, honestly, anything else. It's like cutting off their arm if you ask to take it away from them. When they hand them in the summer, they just practically cry, and when it's fall, they can't wait to get back to school to get their laptop. We've looked at programs like Land School and rearranging the seats, and there's different actual management things you can use with students. And I teach the upper level kids, so my answers would not be the same as you might have with a 7th grader who has a laptop in their room. So you can change where they sit, you can try to, big brother control them and see what's going on. It really depends on your students, your environment, and what will best help you as an instructional leader. But it still comes down to engaging them and finding activities that are meaningful to them so that it doesn't become so much of a distraction. And then what level of distraction are you willing to tolerate within your own instruction? How much of that do you give and take? And that again depends on, I would say, on age and sort of your class. There's everything from, we have a statewide standardized assessment that we use for our MAP scores, which is something we report out to the state, but we can also use them to informally assess instruction. So we can use those programs just to test students and not report it to kind of see where they're looking at. Or textbooks you have tools to assess formally what students have learned. There's the Iowa assessments that have provided end of course assessments for a history class. This is what we believe at the state level you should know, and you can use those with your students and get that feedback. You can also use data just in terms of, you talk about kind of touching base with your students along the way to see what they've learned in either a formative or summative assessment. You can design those yourselves or use what comes with a textbook or comes with something online just to get numbers to see what do my students know, where are they at now, where do I need to get them to. So really there's such a range. It just depends on what you want. Is this the final assessment, or is this annual data, or is this just me checking along with my kids each day, doing some type of assessment, see where they're at. The nice thing is once it's online, it keeps it everywhere, and it's easy to run reports, and it's it's easy to be more consistent and to do it more frequently to measure your instruction than it would have been if we were trying to do this with paper and pencil and get all the kids in at the same time. So it just depends on your purpose, but we should always be making our decisions based on what the data tells us or what the performance tells us for our students. This just makes that process easier. We were very purposeful in our implementation plan. We wanted to make sure that all teachers were prepared before we gave all these laptops to kids and said, okay, here you go. So there was a whole year of just getting teachers trained on how to, if you're going from paper to one-to-one, well, how do you get there? You can't just hand people laptops and say this fall we're going one-to-one, and you still have all this stuff on paper. So we had a whole year and a content management system in place ahead of time so teachers could start lesson by lesson, unit by unit, getting those things online. And that's a huge shift for some districts. That seems like a long time ago for us, but that's a big piece of it. And then where do you put it? Where do you keep it? The nice thing is once you get it there, it's so much easier to change and keep and use and modify than it was before, but getting it there can be a big hurdle as well. Teachers have had laptops for I think 10 years, so the teachers here are very used to what that looks like, how that functions, have a high comfort level with them before the students would even have them. So you really have to lay the groundwork ahead of time to make sure it's going to work. Infrastructure-wise too, which maybe I don't know how relevant this is or not, you got to make sure they're going to work before you hand them to kids. Because if you give every student a laptop and then by noon of every day they don't work, or 20 times throughout the day it shuts down, or it bogs down the network, then you haven't given them anything useful. I mean, that has to be in place, or it does become more of a disruption, an impediment than it would be as an instructional tool. So all that has to be taken care of ahead of time. Then you can start giving to the kids and start figuring out how, what can we really do with these things. And don't expect that, we don't have any expectations on you either have to do this or you have to do that. We like to try and all use the same system. We use Canvas now so that kids are familiar with what they should be using, and it's not different with every teacher, and that requires more of an investment and a conscientious move from the top down to make sure that we're all going to do the same kind of thing, and that's beneficial not only to the teachers but for the students. But that just doesn't happen. Those are decisions made ahead of time that really can make or break whether or not the program's successful. I know schools that have said, here you go, and then after a couple months, what do we do? Or even right away that you're all sort of struggling together, and that's not really beneficial. So patience, gives the teacher some tools, give them time, and make sure everybody's comfortable before you move in, and then jump in and see where you go. I think when you make the decision to go to one-to-one, you should be very conscientious of what your purpose is. One-to-one is not a solution or not a quick fix, and I believe that making the move to one-to-one will merely enhance what you already are. So if you were a school that is striving for best practice and doing what is best for kids, it can become an incredible extension of that. But if you are one that is struggling and you're having some issues and you think the computer will be the answer, it will just exacerbate whatever you already have going on. It will extend that problem as well. So if you think about who you are, what do you want to extend, and then think about how one-to-one can play into that, it still is always about instruction. It's still always about the learning. It's not about the tool. The other piece I think that is important to think about is money. If you're making this decision based on money, you're doing it for the wrong reasons, because it's an investment in learning. It's not the price per tool. I think there's schools that look in different ways to try and save money. Are we looking just for access, or are you looking for it as a really an extension of their learning? And you have to be thoughtful of that before you make that decision. So think about what your intention is. Trying to save money and maybe cut corners and do it the cheap way isn't really, it kind of seems to defeat the purpose. You might be better off staying where you're at. But if you're looking to make an investment that is best for your students' future and their learning, then really you take money off the table and you figure out what's the best for kids and how can we make this work. So the other one is always, show that it's going to increase student achievement before I make the investment. Well, would you ever say that I'm not going to buy new textbooks until you prove to me it's going to increase student achievement? It's not the tool, it's what you do with it. And the potential of what a laptop can do for student learning is so much beyond anything we've ever previously had. So if you think of it from that perspective, then you are doing something for education, you're doing something for learning.